The massive hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with thousands of different voices. Beings from across the galaxy had gathered for the monthly assembly. Some had scales, others had fur, and many looked nothing like anything found on most worlds. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center speaking platform, his blue skin glowing under the bright lights. Veltar pressed a button on his control device. The giant screens around the hall flickered to life. The crowd grew quiet as images appeared showing space battles. Small, crude-looking ships moved across the screen. They looked primitive compared to the sleek vessels most species used. Fellow council members, Veltar began, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. What you see here happened 3 months ago in the Outer Rim territories. These ships belong to a newly discovered species called humans. The footage showed human vessels engaging with Zephyrian warships. The Zephyrian fleet was known throughout the galaxy for its advanced technology and skilled pilots. Yet on the screen, the small human ships moved in ways that seemed impossible. They dodged plasma fire that should have destroyed them. They used tactics that made no sense according to military textbooks. A murmur went through the crowd. Someone from the back shouted, "Those ships look like they were built in a scrapyard." Veltar nodded grimly. "That is exactly what makes them dangerous. These humans do not follow our rules of warfare. They do not surrender when facing certain death." Watch this next part carefully. The screen showed a damaged human ship surrounded by 5 Zephyrian vessels. Any civilized species would have surrendered at this point. Instead, the human ship rammed directly into the largest enemy vessel, destroying both ships in a massive explosion. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Many beings had never seen such behavior. In civilized warfare, surrender was expected when defeat was certain. It saved lives and allowed for prisoner exchanges. What the humans did made no strategic sense. "This is just one example," Veltar continued. "We have documented dozens of similar incidents. Humans seem to become more dangerous when they are losing, not less dangerous." Another video played showing humans surviving on a world where the atmosphere was toxic to most species. They had somehow adapted their equipment to work in conditions that would kill a Zephyrian in minutes. The humans were not just surviving but thriving. "These creatures," Veltar said, his voice growing more serious, "are from a planet called Earth. It is located in what we considered an unimportant system. Their technology is hundreds of years behind ours. Their ships are slower, their weapons weaker, their armor thinner. Yet somehow they continue to surprise us." War Chief Thexra of the Krillian Empire stood up from his seat. He was massive even by Krillian standards. With thick gray skin and sharp teeth, his species had conquered 17 sectors of space through superior military might. "Ambassador Veltar," Thexra said with a voice like grinding stone, "you speak as if these primitives pose some kind of threat. My empire has faced species far more advanced than these humans. We have defeated civilizations that had mastered technologies these Earth creatures have never seen." The Krillian delegation laughed at their leader's words. Other species joined in. The idea that a primitive species could threaten the established galactic order seemed ridiculous. Thexra continued, "The mighty Krillian armada numbers in the thousands. Our ships are powered by singularity engines. Our weapons can crack planets. Our shields can withstand the energy of stars. What could these tiny human ships possibly do against such power?" More laughter filled the hall. A representative from the Altarian collective called out, "Maybe they will throw rocks at your fleet." Veltar waited for the laughter to die down. "I understand your amusement. When I first saw these reports, I too thought they must be mistakes. But I have studied these humans for months now. They are unlike any species we have encountered." He pressed another button. The screen showed a recording from inside a captured human ship. A young human male sat strapped in the pilot's seat. His dark hair was messy and his simple uniform was torn. This was Taemin Kim, a reconnaissance pilot whose ship had been taken during a border patrol. The recording showed Zephyrian interrogators trying to question Taemin. They offered him food, comfortable quarters, and safe return to Earth in exchange for information about human military positions. Most species would have accepted such generous terms. Taemin looked directly at his captors and said something in his own language. The translation appeared on the screen. "I am Pilot Taemin Kim of the Earth Defense Force. My identification number is 779 Delta. That is all you will get from me." The interrogators tried for hours. They increased their offers. They promised wealth and status. They even threatened him. Taemin never said another word except to repeat his name and number. This pilot was rescued 2 weeks later, Veltar explained. He had been tortured but never revealed any useful information. When asked why he endured such treatment, he said he could not betray his fellow humans. The hall grew quieter. Species across the galaxy understood the concept of loyalty, but such extreme dedication was rare. But surely, called out a representative from the mechanical collective, this is just one individual. Not all humans can be so stubborn. Veltar shook his head. That is where you are wrong. We have captured 37 human soldiers in various incidents. Not one has provided useful intelligence. Not one has agreed to work with us. They all show the same pattern of behavior. He showed more footage. Humans fighting in conditions that should have been hopeless. Humans sharing their last rations with wounded comrades. Humans building makeshift hospitals in the middle of battle zones to treat both their own people and enemy wounded. They do not fight for conquest, Veltar said. They do not fight for resources or territory. They fight for each other. This makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous. A new voice spoke from the diplomatic section. It belonged to Heejin Park, Earth's first diplomatic attaché. She was young by galactic standards and wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations. She had been granted observer status but was not yet allowed to address the full council. Permission to speak, she said quietly. Thexra laughed loudly. The primitive wishes to address her betters. This should be entertaining. The council moderator looked uncomfortable. Observer status does not include speaking privileges at General Assembly. Veltar gestured toward Heejin. Perhaps we should hear what the humans have to say about themselves. Absolutely not, Thexra declared. We do not negotiate with species that lack proper civilization. These humans will learn their place in the galactic order through strength, not words. The vote was called quickly. The question was whether humans should be classified as a minor species with limited rights or given provisional membership status. Thexra's faction pushed hard for the minor classification. They argued that humans lacked the technology and cultural development for full galactic participation. Veltar's warnings were noted in the official record, but largely dismissed. The footage was filed away in the archives. Most representatives agreed that while humans might be stubborn, they posed no real threat to the established order. The final vote was overwhelming. Humans were classified as a minor species. They would be allowed limited trade and diplomatic contact, but would have no voice in galactic affairs. Their territory was marked as developing region on star charts. Thexra smiled with satisfaction as the vote concluded. The Krillian Empire will be happy to bring proper civilization to these humans when the time comes. They will learn to respect their betters. As the assembly ended and beings began filing out of the hall, Veltar remained at his podium. He watched Heejin Park gathering her materials. She looked disappointed but not surprised by the outcome. Ambassador Park, he called to her. A word, if you please. She approached his platform cautiously. Most species treated humans with casual dismissal or open contempt. Your people, Veltar said quietly, are going to surprise everyone. I hope the galaxy is ready for what that means. Heejin looked up at him with sharp eyes. We never wanted to surprise anyone, Ambassador. We just wanted to be left alone to develop in peace. I fear that option may no longer exist, Veltar replied. The Krillians see your territory as ripe for expansion. My warnings today will not stop them. Then they will learn what it means to fight humans, she said simply. As she walked away, Veltar wondered if anyone would remember this day when the galaxy learned the truth about the species from Earth. The warning had been given. It had been ignored. Soon everyone would understand why that was a mistake. 6 months had passed since the Galactic Council meeting. The warnings about humans had been filed away and mostly forgotten. War Chief Thexra stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the star charts. His massive gray hands traced the borders of Krillian space. Expand here, he told his officers, pointing to a small yellow star. The system contains a habitable world with human colonists. It will be an easy conquest to demonstrate Krillian power. The system was called Kepler 442 by the humans. The planet had been settled only 10 years earlier. Intelligence reports showed 50,000 human civilians and minimal military presence. Against the 200 warships of Thexra's conquest fleet, they would stand no chance. War Chief, his aide asked, should we offer them the standard surrender terms? Thexra nodded. Of course. We are civilized beings. They will be given the opportunity to submit peacefully. When they see our fleet, They will understand resistance is futile. On the surface of Kepler 442b, Governor Dong-Hyun Lee was reading morning reports when the alerts began sounding. He was a quiet man who had volunteered to lead the colony because he believed in humanity's future among the stars. His office walls were covered with pictures of the colonists' families and children. "Governor," his aide rushed in. "We have a massive fleet approaching the system. 200 ships Krillian design." Dong-Hyun felt his stomach drop. Everyone knew about the Krillian Empire. They were one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. Their ships were massive and armed with weapons that could destroy cities from orbit. "Contact Security Chief Choi immediately," he ordered, "and get me a communication channel to the fleet." So-Young Choi arrived at the government building within minutes. She was small and thin, but had trained with Earth's military before volunteering for colony service. Her mind was already working through defensive possibilities. "How much time do we have?" she asked. "The fleet will reach our system in 6 hours," Dong-Hyun replied. "They are requesting immediate communication." The main screen flickered to life, showing War Chief Thexra. His massive form filled the display. His sharp teeth gleamed as he smiled with confidence. "Primitive humans," Thexra began. "I am War Chief Thexra of the Krillian Empire. Your world now falls under Imperial jurisdiction. You will surrender immediately and prepare for occupation. Comply, and your lives will be spared." Dong-Hyun looked at So-Young. She nodded slightly. They had discussed this possibility many times. The colonists had voted on their response to any invasion attempt. "War Chief Thexra," Dong-Hyun replied calmly. "I am Governor Dong-Hyun Lee of the Kepler 442b colony. We appreciate your interest in our world, but we must decline your generous offer. This planet is under human protection. You have 30 minutes to withdraw from our system before we consider you hostile." The silence on the communication channel stretched for several seconds. Thexra's expression changed from confidence to confusion to amusement. "Did this primitive just threaten me?" he asked his officers loudly. 200 warships against a colony with no fleet, and he tells us to withdraw." The Krillian bridge crew laughed at the absurd situation. Thexra leaned forward toward the camera. "Little human, you have no ships, no weapons, no hope. I will give you one more chance to surrender before I demonstrate Krillian power." Dong-Hyun's voice remained steady. 29 minutes, War Chief." The communication ended. Thexra stared at the blank screen in amazement. In his long military career, he had never encountered such behavior from a clearly defeated enemy. "Begin the assault," he ordered. "Target their government buildings first. A show of force will restore their sanity." The Krillian fleet moved into attack formation. Their massive ships powered up plasma cannons that could level mountains. This would be over in minutes. On the planet's surface, So-Young Choi was already implementing their desperate defense plan. The colonists had known this day might come. They had prepared as best they could with limited resources. "All civilians to underground shelters," she announced over the colony communication system. "Defense teams to assigned positions. Remember your training." Jiwoo Nam was working in the mining complex when the announcement came. She was an engineer who had come to Kepler 442b to build a better life for her family. Now she was running toward the equipment sheds where her real work waited. The colonists had spent months secretly converting mining explosives into anti-ship weapons. The charges were crude but powerful. If they could get close enough to the Krillian ships, they might cause some damage. Min Ho-yoon had been teaching mathematics to the colony children that morning. Now he was helping elderly colonists reach the underground shelters. His students, some as young as 8 years old, were carrying emergency supplies and helping organize the evacuation. "Teacher Minho," asked one little girl, "are the aliens really going to hurt us?" Minho knelt down to her level. "Some aliens are not very nice, but we are going to protect each other just like we always do." The first Krillian plasma bolt struck the planet's surface. Government buildings exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The ground shook with each impact. Any civilized species would have surrendered immediately. Instead, the humans disappeared. The Krillian assault continued for an hour. They destroyed every visible structure, every communication tower, every power plant. Their sensors showed no signs of life in the devastated colony areas. "Cease fire," Thexra ordered. "Send down landing forces to secure the territory." The first Krillian shuttles landed in what had been the colony's main city. Soldiers in heavy armor spread out to begin occupation procedures. They expected to find cowering survivors ready to surrender. Instead, they found nothing. The humans had vanished completely. The problems began small. Krillian patrol squads reported equipment malfunctions. Communication arrays stopped working without explanation. Supply convoys got lost even with GPS guidance. Then the attack started. A Krillian patrol was investigating a damaged building when the structure exploded. Hidden charges placed by Ji-Woo-nam destroyed the entire squad. The explosions looked like accidents, but they happened too often to be coincidence. Krillian commanders found their maps were wrong. Streets had been altered. Road signs pointed in wrong directions. Buildings that should have contained supplies were empty or booby-trapped. Min Ho-yoon led these intelligence operations. Before becoming a teacher, he had studied military history. He organized the colonists into small teams that gathered information about Krillian positions and movements. Children as young as 10 years old moved through the ruins, invisible to alien sensors. They reported enemy locations and carried messages between resistance groups. The Krillians never suspected that their most dangerous enemies might be in elementary school. The 30-minute conquest stretched into 3 days, then a week, then a month. War Chief Thexra stared at the casualty reports in disbelief. He had lost 15 shuttles, dozens of ground vehicles, and over 300 soldiers, against a colony that supposedly had no military forces. How is this possible? He demanded from his officers. Where are they hiding? How are they moving unseen? Why won't they surrender? His intelligence chief cleared his throat nervously. War Chief, we believe the humans are using the natural cave systems. Our sensors cannot penetrate the rock formations. They appear to have prepared extensive underground facilities. Then send troops into the caves and dig them out. We have tried, sir. The humans know the caves perfectly. Our soldiers get lost in the tunnels. Many squads have not returned. Thexra felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. His mighty fleet was being held off by farmers and teachers. Worse, word was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other species were watching the impossible siege with growing interest. On the planet's surface, the humans continued their desperate resistance. They had lost many friends already. The Krillian bombardment had killed nearly 1,000 colonists in the first day. But instead of breaking their spirit, the losses made them fight harder. So Young Choi met with her team leaders in a deep cave beneath the mountains. The cave had been converted into a command center with equipment salvaged from the ruins above. The Krillians are getting frustrated, she reported. Their patrols are becoming more aggressive. They are starting to make mistakes. Ji-Woo-nam nodded. My engineering teams have identified weak points in their landing craft design. If we can get close enough, we can disable their shields. What about ammunition? Asked one team leader. We are running low on explosives. Minho's group has located a Krillian supply depot, So Young replied. We are planning a raid tonight. The raid was successful. 40 human volunteers attacked a supply base defended by 200 Krillian soldiers. Using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare, they destroyed the depot and escaped with valuable equipment. Thexra received the news with growing rage. His soldiers were beginning to show signs of fear. Some were requesting transfers to other assignments. The idea of Krillian warriors being afraid of primitive humans was unthinkable. Send a message to the Galactic Council, he ordered. Request permission to use orbital bombardment against civilian targets. Sir, his aide asked carefully, is that wise? Such action would be seen as necessary, Thexra roared. These humans refuse to follow the rules of civilized surrender. They fight like wild animals. We will treat them accordingly. The mess 3 months had passed since the siege of Kepler 442b began. Across the galaxy, species were watching the impossible situation with growing amazement. The mighty Krillian Empire, conqueror of 17 sectors, was being held at bay by a small human colony. News traveled fast in the age of faster-than-light communication. Every species had heard about the stubborn humans who refused to surrender. Some thought it was amusing. Others found it deeply disturbing. The established order of galactic civilization was being challenged by primitives. Admiral Soo-jin Kang stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the star charts. Her small relief fleet consisted of only 12 ships, everything Earth could spare for the rescue mission. The ships were old and outdated compared to Krillian vessels, but they were crewed by humans who had volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we are receiving signals from the planet's surface. The colonists are still holding out. Soo-jin nodded grimly. She had not expected to find any survivors after 3 months of siege. The fact that humans were still fighting was both inspiring and heartbreaking. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "We begin hit-and-run operations immediately. Target supply convoys and isolated patrol groups. Avoid direct confrontation with the main fleet." Her tactics violated every principle of civilized naval warfare. Proper military doctrine called for fleet engagements between equal forces. Honor required facing your enemy directly. The humans had no interest in honor when their people were dying. On the planet's surface, the colonists had transformed their peaceful settlement into a fortress of tunnels and hidden positions. What had once been farms and schools were now battlegrounds where desperate humans fought for every meter of ground. Dr. Wu Jin Lim worked in an underground medical facility that had been carved from solid rock. The cave was lit by salvaged emergency lights and filled with the sounds of wounded colonists. He had been a peaceful family doctor before the war. Now he performed surgery while plasma fire shook dust from the ceiling above. "Doctor," his assistant called, "we have incoming wounded from the eastern sector." The stretchers carried both humans and Krillians. Some of the alien soldiers had been captured during raids. Others had been found wounded and abandoned by their own forces. Dr. Lim treated them all equally, following his medical oath even in wartime. One young Krillian soldier looked up at him with confusion. "Why do you help me? I am your enemy." Dr. Lim continued bandaging the alien's wounds. "You are injured. That makes you my patient, not my enemy." This behavior puzzled the Krillian prisoners. Their military doctrine taught that enemies should be eliminated or ignored. The concept of treating wounded foes was foreign to their understanding of warfare. Captain Yejin Han led the militia in the colony's most dangerous sector. She had been a police officer on Earth before volunteering for colony service. Her knowledge of urban combat proved invaluable in the ruined city where battles raged building by building. "Team Alpha, move to flanking position," she whispered into her communication device. "Team Beta, prepare demolition charges. Wait for my signal." Her 40 volunteers moved through the rubble like ghosts. They knew every hiding place, every tunnel entrance, every weak point in damaged structures. The Krillian patrol walking through the area had no idea they were surrounded. The explosion brought down an entire city block, trapping 50 enemy soldiers. The humans offered surrender terms through loudspeakers. Most Krillians accepted, preferring captivity to death in the ruins. Young-Soo Park had become legendary among both humans and aliens for his impossible sniper shots. The maintenance worker turned marksman used salvaged Krillian weapons to pick off enemy officers from distances that should have been impossible with human reflexes. "Target acquired," he whispered to his spotter. "Krillian commander 800 meters moving behind the damaged water tower." The shot was technically impossible. Wind, distance, and the target's movement made success nearly 0% likely. Young-Soo fired anyway. The Krillian officer fell, struck precisely in the weak point of his armor. Stories about the ghost sniper spread through Krillian ranks. Soldiers began wearing extra armor and avoiding exposed positions. Some refused patrol duties in certain areas where Young-Soo was known to operate. Miran Song had been the colony's head botanist before the war. Her knowledge of Kepler 442b's ecosystem became a weapon against the invaders. She identified local plants that were toxic to Krillian physiology and used them to contaminate enemy water supplies. The blue flowers near the river, she explained to her team, release spores that cause respiratory problems in their species. If we can spread them around their base camps. Her biological warfare was crude but effective. Krillian soldiers began falling ill with mysterious symptoms. Medical officers could not identify the cause because they had never studied human agricultural techniques. War Chief Thexra received these reports with growing frustration. His mighty war machine was being defeated by farmers using flowers as weapons. The situation was becoming humiliating. "How many ships have we lost to the human relief fleet?" he demanded. 37, War Chief, his aide reported reluctantly. "They strike our supply convoys and disappear before we can respond. Our sensors cannot track them effectively." Admiral Sujin Kang's hit-and-run campaign was slowly bleeding the Krillian fleet. Her ships used tactics that no civilized military would employ. They hid in asteroid fields, attacked from multiple directions simultaneously, and refused to engage in honorable ship-to-ship combat. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "Krillian reinforcements are approaching the system. 50 additional warships." Sujin studied the tactical display. Her 12 ships faced over 200 enemy vessels. Military mathematics made victory impossible. She had no intention of following mathematical probability. "Signal all ship you," she ordered. Operation Desperate Gamble is now in effect. All ships prepare for coordinated strike on the enemy flagship. The attack was suicidal by any rational analysis. 12 human ships charged directly at the heart of the Krillian fleet. They should have been destroyed in minutes. Instead, they used their smaller size and superior maneuverability to slice through enemy formations like knives. The human ships targeted critical systems rather than trying to destroy enemy vessels outright. They disabled engines, communications arrays, and weapon systems before disappearing back into space. The Krillian fleet found itself partially crippled and thoroughly confused. On the planet's surface, the arrival of reinforcements prompted a new Krillian offensive. They decided to capture the colony school, thinking human civilians would surrender to protect their children. The response shocked even battle-hardened Krillian veterans. Every human in the colony moved to defend the school. Farmers who had never held weapons charged armored soldiers with improvised clubs. Elderly colonists threw themselves at enemy positions with grenades strapped to their bodies. Children as young as 12 fought alongside adults with desperate courage. The battle for the school lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the building was in ruins, but still in human hands. The Krillian assault force had suffered 70% casualties. More importantly, they had witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. They fought like demons, one surviving soldier reported. When we wounded one human, 3 others would charge us to protect their fallen comrade. They showed no fear of death. Communications officer Bo-Ra Kim died during the battle, maintaining contact with Admiral Sujin's fleet even as plasma fire consumed the communications center around her. Her last transmission coordinated a supply drop that kept the defenders fighting for another day. Engineer Jae Sung Choi manually overloaded the colony's backup power plant during the final Krillian assault on the school. The electromagnetic pulse disabled enemy equipment for miles around, giving human forces the opportunity to counterattack. He died at his post, but his sacrifice saved hundreds of lives. The casualty reports reached War Chief Thexra on his flagship. He stared at the numbers in disbelief. His forces had superior technology, overwhelming numbers, and complete air superiority. Yet they were losing ground to humans armed with mining tools and homemade explosives. War Chief, his intelligence officer, reported, "We are receiving communications from other sectors. Several species are questioning our ability to complete this conquest. Some are suggesting that humans might be more dangerous than we assumed." This was the nightmare scenario Thexra had not considered. The Krillian Empire's reputation was built on the certainty of victory. If they could not defeat a small human colony, other species might begin to question Krillian invincibility. Intelligence analyst Haewon Young worked in the deepest caves beneath the colony, monitoring alien communications with equipment salvaged from crashed Krillian ships. Her translations revealed that the siege was having effects far beyond Kepler 442b. "Governor Lee," she reported during the daily briefing, "I am intercepting diplomatic messages from across the galaxy. Multiple species are discussing the human resistance. Some are calling for Galactic Council intervention." Governor Dong-Hyun Lee looked older than his years. 3 months of constant warfare had aged him, but his deter. 4 months into the siege, War Chief Thexra faced a problem he had never encountered in his long military career. His supposedly invincible empire was being embarrassed by a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Worse, other alien civilizations were beginning to take notice. The Krillian Empire had built its reputation on swift, overwhelming victories. Every conquest had followed the same pattern. Massive fleet arrives, demonstrates superior firepower, enemy surrenders, territory absorbed. The process was so reliable that most species surrendered without fighting at all. Humans had broken that pattern completely. Thexra stood in his private quarters, reviewing casualty reports that made no sense. His forces had lost 60 ships, 3,000 soldiers, and countless amounts of equipment. The humans had lost more people proportionally, but they showed no signs of surrender. If anything, they seemed to fight harder as their losses mounted. "War Chief," his communications officer announced over the ship's internal system, "Urgent message from Krillian High Command." The holographic image of Supreme Commander Velnox appeared in the room. She was even larger than Thexra, with scars covering her gray hide from decades of conquest. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had never experienced defeat. "Thexra, She began without greeting. Explain to me how a minor species with primitive technology has held you at bay for 4 months. Supreme Commander, Thexra replied carefully. These humans fight unlike any species we have previously encountered. They do not follow civilized rules of warfare. They refuse to surrender even when facing certain death. Velnox's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you telling me that the mighty Krillian Empire cannot defeat farmers and miners? They are more than farmers, Supreme Commander. They have somehow weaponized their entire civilian population. Children carry explosives. Elderly colonists conduct sabotage operations. Medical personnel treat wounded soldiers then disappear to fight again. Excuses, Velnox snarled. The Galactic Council is asking questions about Krillian military effectiveness. Other species are watching this siege with interest that concerns me. You will end this embarrassment immediately. Supreme Commander, I request permission to use orbital bombardment against civilian targets. If we eliminate their population centers, denied. Such action would violate Galactic Convention and give our enemies propaganda to use against us. You will defeat these humans using conventional methods, or I will find someone who can. The communication ended, leaving Thexra alone with his growing desperation. He had one option left that he had been reluctant to try. Threats against civilians were considered uncivilized, but perhaps humans would respond to such pressure where they had ignored everything else. On the planet's surface, the colonists had learned to live in a state of constant warfare. The underground city they had built in the cave systems housed 36,000 survivors. Children attended school in chambers carved from rock. Farmers grew food in hydroponic gardens lit by captured Krillian equipment. Governor Donghyun Lee met with his council in the deepest part of the underground complex. The weight of leadership had carved lines in his face, but his voice remained calm and steady. Intelligence reports indicate the Krillians are planning something new, So Young Choi reported. Their orbital formations have changed. They are positioning their heaviest ships directly above our population centers. Dr. Woo Jin Lim looked up from medical reports he was reviewing. We have 1,400 wounded in the medical bays. If they attack the civilian areas directly, they won't, Donghyun said firmly. Orbital bombardment of civilians would violate galactic law. Even the Krillians would not risk such international condemnation. Captain Yejin Han shook her head grimly. Governor, with respect, desperate enemies do desperate things. We should prepare for the worst. The transmission came 12 hours later. Thexra's massive form filled every screen in the underground city. His voice echoed through chambers where children were trying to sleep and wounded soldiers were recovering from surgery. Humans of Kepler 442b, he began. Your stubborn resistance ends now. You will surrender immediately and unconditionally, or I will begin orbital bombardment of your civilian population centers. You have 1 hour to comply. Silence fell across the underground city. Parents held their children closer. Wounded soldiers tried to sit up straighter. Everyone looked toward the main screen where their governor would respond. Donghyun Lee stood slowly. He had practiced this moment in his mind many times, but the reality was more difficult than any rehearsal. He knew his words would be broadcast across the galaxy, recorded for history. War Chief Thexra, he said clearly, I am Governor Donghyun Lee of the human colony on Kepler 442b. Your threat is noted and rejected. If you want our world, you will have to take it from our cold, dead hands, and even then we will make you pay for every inch. The transmission continued. You seem to believe that threatening our families will make us surrender. You are wrong. Threatening our children makes us more dangerous, not less dangerous. We invite you to learn the difference. Across the underground city, colonists began to cheer. The sound started quietly but grew louder as more voices joined in. They were facing possible extinction, but they were facing it together. Thexra cut the communication in rage. He had expected the humans to see reason when faced with the destruction of their children. Instead, they had essentially declared war on his entire fleet. Prepare orbital bombardment, he ordered. Target the largest population center. Perhaps a demonstration will restore their sanity. War Chief, his aide said nervously. Galactic law strictly forbids. I know what galactic law forbids, Thexra roared. But these humans have proven they cannot be reasoned with. Sometimes civilization requires harsh methods. The first plasma bolt struck Firebase 7, a defensive position that protected the main entrance to the underground city. Sergeant Kyung-Soo Jeon and 200 human Marines held the fortress against 3,000 Krillian assault troops. The battle became legendary, not because the humans won, but because they held their ground for 18 hours against impossible odds. Firebase 7 was built into a mountainside with limited approaches. The humans used every advantage of terrain and defensive preparation. Kyung-Soo John had been a factory worker before volunteering for military service. He had no formal training in tactics or strategy. What he had was an absolute refusal to let enemy forces reach the civilians sheltering below. "Hold the line," he shouted over the sound of plasma fire. "They don't get past us." His Marines fought with weapons salvaged from previous battles. They had limited ammunition and no hope of reinforcement. When their guns ran out of power, they used improvised explosives. When the explosives were gone, they fought with tools and bare hands. The Krillian assault waves crashed against Firebase 7 like ocean waves against a rock. Each attack left more alien bodies on the slopes, but also claimed more human defenders. By the 10th hour, Kyung-Soo had only 60 Marines left alive. "Sergeant," his communications operator called. "Admiral Soo-jin's fleet is requesting permission to attempt evacuation." Kyung-Soo looked at his exhausted soldiers. They were outnumbered 50-1, running out of ammunition and facing certain death. None of them asked to be evacuated. "Tell the Admiral we appreciate the offer," he replied. "But our job is here. We hold this position until relieved, or until there are no more of us to hold it." Communications Officer Bo-Ra Kim died at her post during the 14th hour of battle. She had maintained contact with Fleet Command, even as plasma fire consumed the communication center around her. Her final transmission coordinated a supply drop that gave the defenders enough ammunition to continue fighting. Engineer Jae-Sung Choi made the ultimate sacrifice during the final Krillian assault. When enemy forces broke through the outer defenses, he manually overloaded the position's power plant. The electromagnetic pulse disabled Krillian equipment for miles around and created the opening the defenders needed to counterattack. The explosion killed Jae-Sung instantly, but it also saved Firebase 7. The Krillian assault force, blinded and confused by the electromagnetic pulse, found themselves trapped in a killing field created by the remaining human defenders. When the battle ended after 18 hours, Firebase 7 remained in human hands. Sergeant Kyung-Soo John was found dead at his post, still gripping his weapon. Of the 200 Marines who had defended the position, only 37 survived. The Krillian assault force had suffered even worse casualties. Of the 3,000 soldiers who attacked Firebase 7, fewer than 800 made it back to their own lines. The survivors carried stories that would spread through Krillian ranks like poison. "They fought like demons," one soldier reported. "When we wounded one human, 2 others would drag him to safety, while a third charged us with explosives. They showed no fear of death, only anger that we threatened their people." War Chief Thexra received the casualty reports with growing horror. His forces had lost another 500 soldiers in a single battle against a defensive position that should have fallen in minutes. The humans had held Firebase 7 not through superior technology or tactics, but through sheer determination to protect their families. Intelligence analyst Haiwan Jung worked frantically in the underground communication center. Monitoring 6 months after the siege began, War Chief Thexra stood in his private quarters staring at reports that documented the complete failure of his military campaign. The numbers told a story that should have been impossible. His mighty fleet had lost 93 warships, over 4,000 soldiers, and countless amounts of equipment. The humans had paid an even higher price in lives, but they continued to resist. More troubling were the reports from other sectors of Krillian space. 7 different species had launched rebellions against Krillian rule in the past month. The human resistance had inspired others to question whether the Empire was truly invincible. "War Chief," his aide announced, "Supreme Commander Velnox is requesting immediate communication." The holographic image appeared, but Velnox looked different than before. Her confidence had been replaced by barely controlled fury. Behind her, Thexra could see other Krillian commanders watching the conversation. "Thexra," she began in a voice like grinding stone, "you have brought shame upon the entire Krillian Empire. A simple conquest has become a galactic crisis. Other species are questioning our authority. Rebellions are spreading across our territories." "Supreme Commander," Thexra replied desperately, "give me more time, more ships. These humans cannot resist forever." "Time?" Velnox snarled. "We have lost more military assets in 6 months than in the previous 10 years of expansion. The Galactic Council is discussing sanctions against our empire. Some species are calling for military intervention to protect the humans." She leaned forward, her scarred face filling the hologram. You will withdraw your forces immediately. This disaster ends now. Supreme Commander, we cannot retreat from primitives. The damage to our reputation, the damage is already done, Velnox roared. Every day this siege continues, we look weaker. Withdraw now or face court-martial for incompetence. The communication ended, leaving Thexra alone with the bitter taste of defeat. For the first time in Krillian military history, they were retreating from a conquered world. The primitives from Earth had achieved the impossible. On the planet's surface, Governor Dong Hyun Lee received the news in the underground command center. After 6 months of constant warfare, the message seemed too good to believe. They are really withdrawing? He asked Admiral Sujin Kang, whose fleet had arrived that morning to support the colony. Confirmed, Sujin replied. Our sensors show Krillian ships leaving orbit. They are abandoning their ground forces and equipment. The underground city erupted in celebrations that could be heard even through solid rock. Colonists who had lived in constant fear for months finally allowed themselves to believe they might survive. Children who had grown up in bomb shelters could see sunlight again. Dr. Woo Jin Lim worked frantically in the medical center, treating the last wave of wounded from final Krillian attacks. Many of his patients were aliens, Krillian soldiers who had been abandoned by their retreating fleet. Doctor, one young Krillian asked weakly, why do you help us? We tried to destroy your people. Dr. Lim continued working on the soldiers' injuries. Because you are hurt and I am a doctor. That is enough reason. Several Krillian soldiers had actually defected during the final weeks of fighting. They had been horrified by orders to attack civilian targets and chose to surrender, rather than participate in what they saw as senseless slaughter. Captain Ye-Jin Han oversaw the colony's reconstruction efforts. The surface world was a ruin after months of bombardment, but the humans began rebuilding immediately. They had proven they could survive anything the galaxy could throw at them. Ma'am, one of her assistants reported, we are receiving communication requests from dozens of species. They want to establish diplomatic relations with our colony. The siege had made Kepler 442b famous throughout the galaxy. The small human colony that had defied the Krillian Empire was now seen as a symbol of resistance against oppression. 3 weeks after the Krillian withdrawal, the most important message arrived. It came from the Galactic Council itself, signed by Ambassador Veltar and dozens of other species representatives. Ambassador Hee-Jin Park read the message aloud to the assembled colonists. She had finally been granted full diplomatic status after humanity's unexpected victory. To the brave humans of Kepler 442b, she read, the Galactic Council recognizes your courage and determination in defending your world against unprovoked aggression. We hereby classify humanity as a protected developing species and formally censure the Krillian Empire for violations of galactic law. The classification was unprecedented. Never before had a species achieved protected status through military resistance. Usually, such protection was granted to peaceful civilizations that needed time to develop safely. But the humans had earned their protection through blood and sacrifice. They had proven that technological inferiority meant nothing against opponents who refused to surrender. Young Soo Park, the legendary sniper, found himself recruited by multiple species who wanted to learn human military tactics. The maintenance worker who had become famous for impossible shots was now being offered positions in alien militaries. I appreciate the offers, he told the recruiters. But my place is here, helping rebuild our world. Miran Song returned to her botanical research. But now her work had galactic significance. Species throughout the galaxy wanted to study human agricultural techniques and biological warfare methods. Her use of local plants against Krillian forces had inspired new fields of research. The memorial wall in the colony's rebuilt center bore thousands of names. Human colonists who had died defending their home, but also Krillian soldiers who had defected and died protecting human civilians. The wall reminded everyone that courage could be found in any species. Fleet Admiral Sujin Kang found herself courted by dozens of civilizations, seeking alliance with humanity. Her tactical innovations during the siege had proven that smaller forces could defeat larger ones through superior strategy and determination. Admiral, the Altarian Collective's representative asked, would humanity consider a mutual defense pact? Our species has faced Krillian expansion for decades. Sujin smiled diplomatically. Humanity seeks peaceful relations with all species. We will defend ourselves if attacked, but we prefer to build rather than destroy. The galactic political situation had changed completely. The Krillian Empire faced rebellions on multiple fronts as species that had submitted to their rule began to question whether resistance was possible. The humans had provided a template for successful defiance. Dr. Wu Jin Lim established the galaxy's first interspecies trauma center on Kepler 442b. He treated not just human survivors but Krillian veterans who struggled with what their military called human syndrome, a condition where soldiers became unable to fight after witnessing human courage. The humans showed us something we had forgotten, one Krillian veteran explained during therapy. They fought not for conquest or glory but for each other. It made us question everything we believed about warfare. Ambassador Veltar visited the colony personally 3 months after the siege ended. He walked through the rebuilt streets with Governor Dong-Hyun Lee, observing the peaceful community that had defied an empire. "You have changed the galaxy," Veltar told him. "Other species are beginning to understand that cooperation might be stronger than conquest." Dong-Hyun pointed to children playing in parks that had been battlefields months earlier. "We never wanted to change anything. We just wanted to raise our families in peace." That desire, Veltar replied, proved more powerful than the mightiest war fleet in galactic history. The story concluded with a special session of the Galactic Council, where humanity was granted full membership status. Ambassador Hai Jin Park delivered her species' first official address to the Assembly. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," she began, "humanity seeks friendship with all species. We have learned that peace is precious because we have paid the price of war. We offer our hand in cooperation to any who wish to build a better future." The vote for human membership was unanimous. Even former enemies supported the motion, recognizing that humanity had earned their place through sacrifice and determination. Captain Tae-min Kim, the pilot whose capture had been shown in the original warning footage, now commanded humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. His ship ventured into uncharted regions of the galaxy, carrying the message that Earth sought peaceful contact with new civilizations. As his vessel entered unknown space, alien species across the galaxy shared a new understanding. The warning about humans had been accurate, but not in the way anyone expected. Humans were dangerous not because they would conquer others, but because they would inspire others to fight for freedom. The small colony on Kepler 442b had proven that determination and unity could overcome any technological advantage. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that some things were worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. War Chief Thexra was stripped of rank and exiled from Krillian space. His failure had cost the Empire its reputation for invincibility. In his final report, he wrote words that would be studied by military historians for generations. "We defeated their ships, destroyed their cities, and killed their soldiers. But we could not break their spirit. The humans fought,